Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got an incredible panel discussion for this next hour. My name is Jason Chu. I'm a rapper, I'm a poet. I actually am from the Northeast. So, New York Chinatown is definitely, a place that I grew up going to, a place that I learned a lot. I learned a lot of Asian American culture, heritage, and community in the city. I am, however, based in LA, which is why it is sunny out. So I'm here with some incredible folks, uh, all of whom are doing great work in their communities as individuals, but also as key parts of Asian American community organizations. So before we get into conversations about activism, especially about online activism, I was just hoping that y'all might be able to go around a little bit and introduce yourselves. Let's go, Kari. Would you like to open us up?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kari. I am calling in from Hawaii. I'm from Hawaii, then I moved to LA, and then now I'm back here, just quarantining while I can. But I'm the social media director for Hate is a Virus, which is a movement and nonprofit to combat hate within or hate against the Asian American community, as well as building solidarity with other marginalized groups. I'm also the social media director for We Are Uprisers, which is a community-based streetwear brand, and also do freelance social media management for a couple of AAPI creatives. But I'm really happy to be here and really excited to be with these women and Jason.
Women and Jason. That's what we got here. Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Kari. Lily, why don't you go next?
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Lily, she, hers pronouns. I'm a social strategist at a digital marketing agency by day. By night, I'm a social strategist for Send Chinatown Love. And we're a community organization that was founded in the beginning of the pandemic back in March. And we provide relief directly to small Asian immigrant-owned businesses in Chinatowns all over New York City. We provide an online platform and build a digital community for restaurants who otherwise wouldn't have it. And we realized during our activism work, we could not continue without combating the racism within our own community. So really looking forward to this amazing conversation today.
So thanks for being with us, Lily. Yin, why don't you introduce yourself and also your organization next?
Hey everyone, I'm Yin, she, her. I'm the director of Think Chinatown, and we're a nonprofit based in Manhattan's Chinatown. We are an intergenerational nonprofit, so we're a part of a nonprofit that's been around since the recovery from 9/11. So there's a lot to learn from there. But Think is about 4 years old, and our work intersects storytelling, arts, and neighborhood engagement. So we're also very aware of issues that intersect from the city to their neighborhood. For instance, a mega jail that's planned by our mayor at 125 White Street, which borders our neighborhood, right on the edge of Chinatown. And also, for instance, really concerned about the community engagement process, which is going on currently for 70 Mulberry, which is our community center that had suffered a fire in January. So just worried about that stuff and keeping an eye on all that community engagement stuff, making sure that voices from our community are heard. But also we have Chinatown Arts Week coming up. And this is a really fun week. I'm really tired right now because I'm in the middle of planning it. Our calendar just released today, so everyone go to thinkchinatown.org to check it out. This year, it's half virtual, so people who are not in New York City, you can still join in, get that virtual Qigong class in. Got some great storytelling projects we are releasing, so excited about this. There are two big features. Is a shadow puppet show commissioned from Spiko Wabe, who is working with our Fujianese opera company here to use their pieces to create a shadow puppet show, which we'll be showing through a window. And our second commission we're super excited about is with Black Gotham Experience, which goes into the day of life of Domingo Anthony, who was a landowner, first Black landowner in where we now call Chinatown. So happy to be here.
Awesome. And thank you so much. And we're definitely going to get into more of that, more of the amazing work that your orgs are all doing. So thanks for sharing that. And then last, but certainly not least of the intros, not that anyone's least, we're all equal, but different. Yashica, please
Hi.
introduce yourself and what you're up to.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Yashica Dutt. I'm an associate creative director at Admir Asia. Admir Asia, as a lot of us might already know, is one of the leading advertising agencies, not only in New York, but in the entire United States. We're also one of the oldest. And beyond being just a marketing agency, we are at the forefront of Asian American representation in media, in storytelling. We're also now really heavily involved with advocacy work, trying to get Asian American voices out there, trying to create connections and collaborations between brands that might not even possibly conceive, looking at the Asian American demographic and connecting them to grassroots Asian American organizers. So there's a lot of good stuff that we are involved in. I might like to give a shout out to our website. Please go out at admirasia.com, check out the amazing work we've done. Outside of that, I'm an author. I just published a book a couple of years ago. It's called Coming Out as Dalit. And I'm heavily involved in activism and advocacy within the South Asian community from a caste perspective. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome, Yashka, thank you so much. And again, those orgs folks are Hate is a Virus, and then Lily is at Send Chinatown Love, Yin is at Think Chinatown, and Yashka is at Admirasia. Again, I'm your host, Jason Chu, he, him, his. And without further ado, one thing that I really, really love about everything that y'all just shared and the orgs and the work that's represented here is that it's very interdisciplinary, right? We're combining everything that y'all do, combines frontline with messaging campaigns, with, you know, not just political activism, but community activism, narrative work. So I was wondering, y'all could go around, no particular order. Y'all are on the cutting edge, especially in this pandemic, right? There's a traditional way of community building, of organizing, that's very get bodies out, right? And that's an incredible time-tested tradition in the Asian American community, right? There is 150 plus years of Asian American history that folks don't know about. That's been about mobilizing communities, getting communities out. It's different right now. It's different right now in a way that plays to a lot of your strengths. So I'd love if y'all could just share a win. You know what I'm saying? Let's open it up with some highlights. What are some of the highlights? Let's not say some of the one highlight from each of you. What's one highlight of the last 3 to 6 months that you've seen work in your orgs in a way that was maybe unexpected or maybe very indicative of where you see online activism succeeding? Whoever would like to jump in first, feel free to unmute and just go for it.
I can go first since I did go last there. So we've actually seen a couple of wins, but since you are limiting me to one, I'm just going to stick to that. So the platform that we recently built and developed, it's called Our Evolution, and it's a platform that we've designed so that we can connect brands to grassroots level organizers. And it all started way back at the beginning of the pandemic when we were still going into work, and we noticed that how Asian Americans, and I would have to say East Asian Americans in particular, were facing xenophobic attacks and were facing discrimination and verbal assault and abuse. And that was very disturbing for a lot of us. So we really realized that this is the time for us to step beyond being just a marketing agency and to really listen to what's going on the ground, to put a ear to the ground, and how do we play a role that plays best to our skills, best to our strengths, which is being an advertising agency. So our first platform that we started from there was Racism is Contagious. And then later on, we moved on to, which was Racism is Contagious was this platform that they were unifying resources to draw attention to the xenophobic hate and bullying that our community was facing and still continues to face. And then the other platform that we are extremely proud of is called Our Evolution. Now, Our Evolution has started as a collaborative activity. But in the post-COVID era, what we've turned it into is an effort about how we can get brands to see marketing opportunities within the Asian American community, because there is this inherent narrative that, you know, Asian Americans are kind of perpetual foreigners. We are doing okay. So, you know, the problems that we face, the issues that we face, somehow haven't gotten the same kind of attention or the attention that we deserve. Like, for example, just to take you a little bit about the McKinsey report that was just released, Asian Americans are about 6% of the total population in the United States. However, in high contact essential workers, we are about 20%. So 20% Asian Americans are physicians and surgeons, and 25%, over 25%, are involved in food and accommodation businesses. So we are kind of facing the brunt of this pandemic in both ways, whether it is, you know, being exposed to the virus or facing economic downturn. As you know, our folks from Chinatown, Save Chinatown will be able to, and Love Chinatown, Send Love Chinatown will be able to talk about in more detail. But beyond that, also about the xenophobic attacks that are ongoing, what we realize that these issues need to be understood and seen widely by the mainstream media, by the mainstream culture, because just somehow those, you know, we heard a little uptick of news from March to June, but then it kind of disappeared. However, the attacks didn't. As we know, very recently, this gut-wrenching incident where this elderly lady from Bensonhurst was set on fire. And, you know, these kind of incidents haven't stopped, and we've tried to create these interventions where brands can get involved and put their weightage, put their money, and put their mouth behind these causes by connecting them to grassroots organizers. So that's our evolution.
I love that. I love that you're creating infrastructure to sell things that are already going on, right?
Totally.
And that's, instead of creating new things or launching new things, you're helping to bring visibility to things that already exist and are popping in the community. Lily, what's worked for y'all?
I want to pop in. Thank you, Yashica, for the amazing transition. And I wanted to focus on a campaign that we ran that was really intersectional between Black Lives Matter and our own organization supporting Chinatown small businesses. During this time, we didn't want to do any performative activism or create assets that would contribute to virtue signaling that was really rampant online at the time. And we were kind of considering what is a value that we can actually bring, and looking inwards, like the demographic that we've always been reaching is something that really similar to the people in our org. We are usually younger generation, and we are the proud children of immigrants. And we've spent our whole lives being that bridge between our elders and the cultural community surrounding us. And like personally, I've grown up my whole life like translating for my parents. So we were thinking this is a crucial time to translate the reality of what was happening around us to the generation that raised us. And the communities that were being impacted, because they were being exposed to false scripts on WeChat and really biased reporting about what was happening around us, the protests. And our solution that really, really worked, and I'm so grateful for our team for really stopping all of our operations to mobilize entirely for this effort, was creating a crowdsourced social justice vocabulary that would provide translations for terms like police brutality, model minority myth, to the larger API languages from Mandarin to Nepali to Arabic. And because we believe that storytelling, of course, changes exactly how we interact and engage with the activism environment around us. And we needed to disrupt all these racist narratives that our generation before us was absorbing. Any of the non-English speaking family members or community leaders around us. So kind of this was our solution. And I think the takeaway from this is to always look inward to your organization or your brand, seeing what is true for yourself so that you can integrate that style into the way you activate, because that way it feels more true and authentic, and looking at your impact versus your intention. Because at this time, a lot of brands were creating these really beautiful graphics signaling their support for BLM. But what can you do that is really uniquely impacting your community at this pivotal political moment? And you can always evolve that graphic into something next level. So level up.
That's awesome. Thank you, Lily. And I'm struck by, how y'all did something that was intergenerational, right? Multi-generational, between immigrant generations, between later American-born generations, even bilingual, interlingual. And that's so crucial, right? So often we think of social media, or we think of, online activism as a very new media thing. But the truth is everyone's online now, right? And if we're not accessing that, that's almost on us. Right, it's almost on us to break through those barriers, and it's incredible that y'all are able to do that. Yin, Kari, what kind of takeaways, what kind of highlights have y'all seen? A takeaway, a highlight. Yeah.
Yes, so I think that, well, the first takeaway, well, it's both the takeaway and a highlight, is just like the power of the creative community, which is something that Hate is a Virus has really stemmed from, and it still continues to propel this movement and organization. Just seeing, sometimes, you can't translate, we can't translate our pain or our frustrations into words. And so seeing, poetry, seeing artwork, seeing Jason use a song, of different creatives just really expressing it, and having like Hate is a Virus kind of be that that outlet and that facilitator to kind of put action behind all of those creative efforts too. And so that has been something that, honestly, like, I will see like people who like DM us, or they'll send in like their artwork and saying that like, I've been really inspired by this movement, like there's something for me now. And so being able to just like see their artwork, like I cry, like, when we see their work, when we see like their stories, and they'll repost our shirts and saying like what this meant to us, which is really, and that's why we really want to emphasize representation. And we also want to uplift the creative community. And it's especially in this digital age, it's how you communicate to this younger generation, and how that younger generation, like Lily said, communicates to their elders. But I think that our key pinnacle has been our virtual events, which is Raise a Million. And so we had one earlier in May, just talking about just all the racism going on towards Asian Americans, and to raise money for small businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19. And then now we are going to, in 2 weeks, we have our second Raise a Million on October 17th. And this time it's a little bit different. And honestly, for me, it's a little bit more meaningful, because we are uniting the creative community together with an emphasis on how Black culture and Black pop culture specifically has influenced like the Asian American creative community, and kind of working to build that solidarity, but building solidarity in a way that people can see how Black culture has integrated into our daily lives, and that our struggles aren't mutually exclusive, and that there are more ways than just like straight on like activism, that you can show support and show solidarity, and also help them build equity too. And so that's what we are super excited for, and it's a way that looks cool, and that people want to join. And it's inviting, because we have an incredible lineup of panelists and performers, but also it's that they'll take away something really impactful, and hopefully that it'll encourage them to act. And we'll also be raising money for creatives.
I love it. And what I hear in a lot of what you just shared is, it's exactly what Lily was sharing. We're all talking about, how do we do online activism that's not virtue signaling, right? Now, you do anything positive online, you're going to be called, somebody's going to label it virtue signaling, right? But the difference between performative activism is that call to action, right? What are we tangibly getting out of it? What are we tangibly activating? We can't gather in 500 people gatherings right now, but we can ask people to impact their communities around them that they are embedded in, and that's great. Yin, what's a takeaway? What's a highlight of what you've seen going on?
I went last on purpose because I kind of feel like the odd one out here, and I wouldn't put myself like in the role of like being a super like online presence. We are very much in neighborhood. And so thinking about, and like, I really appreciate what Lily said about like thinking about what type of activism is like true to yourself. And the way that I guess we operate with Think is like really getting geeky and diving deep. And so a lot of that had to do with like the research we put together to bolster advocacy efforts for COVID relief equity that we were seeing our community members, and especially business owners in our community, were struggling with just systemic issues with how COVID relief programs were being distributed, lack in language outreach, just how the programs were even set up really excluded a lot of Chinatown or any immigrant-owned, family-ran businesses, and so it wasn't. I don't think we even really posted much about this. I didn't really know how to share this, but like I took from the research from my team, was able to testify on Zoom in the city council and also state assembly on behalf of our team, and also bring someone whose family runs a business as well to make sure her voice was heard as well. Because when I hear these conversations at the city level where policies being made, these voices are not being included. And that's really something that we think is necessary because, in this vulnerable time, right, it's displacement is really on everyone's mind, because in this time of weakness, it's like, who's going to benefit from, there are going to be benefiters, right, from this time. And so we gotta, be vigilant on, making sure our community members also have just equal access to all the resources that are available out there to have just fair shot of survival at this tough time.
Yeah, thanks. I'm struck, Yin, as you share that, and what everybody's been sharing. There's a couple of kinds of translation going on here, right? There's literal translation between folks who may not be fluent in English, between folks who may speak a heritage language. There's also a sort of translation of knowledge going on in these campaigns that I see. Everyone has these specialties, Yin, I know your background, I know your bio. You've done so much urban development work, so much urban design work. And you have small business owners, you have tenants who may not in their immediate circles have access to that kind of systematized knowledge. And there's a translation between, I think of Prometheus, like there's this thing that's been hidden away that y'all are translating into the community to let them know this is how you can testify before a city assembly. This is how you can get this vocabulary and put it on WeChat. That is really cool.
Can I now?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, well, Chinatown was built out of exclusion, right? Like, that's why Chinatowns were formed. And through exclusion, right, we build parallel power structures, ourselves. We support ourselves through, lending circles, through family associations. And when you do that, that's great. And there's like so much great hyper-local support. But then there's a disconnect to understanding the wider view. And that is where inequities happen on the larger level. If there are not enough connections, or the connections that happen between our community and the city are too few, so that the power is held by like a very select few, and somehow things don't always pan out the way they should. Talking about it.
Well, they pan out the way that they were set up to pan out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Urban. It's not. Yeah. The city, the flow of money, the flow of resources, the flow of power through a city is set up to benefit certain people, right? And we need to be aware of that and act as that intermediary between our communities and what is out there. Yeah. Thanks for saying that. That's actually a really good segue into the next segment. So to those of you who are tuning in, who missed the intro, this is part 2 of the anti-racism panels at the Asian American International Film Festival, the 43rd edition of that. We're talking about online activism campaigns, and thank you to Asia Society, our community partner for this series. So Yin, jumping off of what you just said, there's this idea, right, that there are people, communities, like a lot of AAPI communities, that are structurally, systemically disenfranchised. And I want to broaden that, right? Because there's other communities alongside us that we operate in solidarity with. Already, a lot of y'all have touched on Black Lives Matter is such a important, strident, resurgent call this summer. And I want to sort of jump off what you just said, Yin, about navigating access to power, reframing systems and points of connection, to also talk about solidarity with other movements, right? You know, we can kind of free for all it, but I'd love to hear from all of y'all. You know, how do we do Asian American community-based activism in a way that doesn't detract or doesn't play against, right? Doesn't pit us artificially against other marginalized communities, while also keeping our unique, important, and often overlooked concerns at the forefront.
Should I go ahead?
Sure.
So, yeah, that's such a great question, because even you know, being a part of the Admire Asia, this is something that we've been navigating. And even personally, being Asian American, you know, we want to be a part of BLM, but also we have to reckon with what are we bringing to our own communities. And that, I think, is really important to understand first and foremost, that especially in the world of marketing, or even in any corporate structure, the fact that we have diversity right now, the fact that we have certain provisions, the fact that we have this call to have representation, happened because of the African American civil rights movement. And that's something we all need to not just remember, but also educate, because there are, you know, a lot of, especially a huge chunk of the Asian American Pacific Islander community is, we are new immigrants. I myself moved here in 2014. We might not be familiar with the history of this country. We come into this crucible that is already created, and we sort of get fixated into what is given to us. So what is our responsibility as an ad agency? First and foremost is to educate. How do we put out resources that reckon with that history? And second of all, how do we look inwards? The first, you know, what we need to do is maybe confront our internal biases, maybe talk about, you know, like we do with white supremacies. How do we talk to our own families? How do we talk to people who are in our own neighborhoods, and maybe check them? That is extremely important. And you know, you brought up a really good question there, about pitting this community versus that community. What we would, you know, as personally, what I would like to say is that is a myth. That is a myth that is created by a certain structure that is created to benefit only a certain people. That, you know, the whole pie, the 99.9% is reserved for, you know, a white supremacist structure, and we get 1%, which is not true. When we have scarcity, only in those situations we feel that we're compelled to compete. There is no competition. There is enough for us to go around. And only if we work in solidarity, only if we understand that our progress is tied together. It doesn't have to be us versus them. It is when we are together, then we can really move forward. And when we hold on to our unique histories, because we have more than enough to go around. We have so much diversity within the Asian American community. Even within South Asia, we have Indian communities, Pakistanis, Nepali, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankan. So, you know, we all have our own unique cultures. And what I personally strongly feel is that when we highlight those unique cultures, and instead of sandpapering the issues as one, instead of just projecting a certain community on the forefront, we talk about intersectionality even within the Asian American community. That's how we can enrich our lived experiences in a really powerful way.
Love it. Lily, I saw that you are unmuted also. What's your thoughts?
That was beautiful, Yashica. Thank you. Kind of speaking to how our organization, Send Chinatown Love, engages in our activism without detracting from BLM. Our solution is driving campaigns that directly nourish and benefit Black and Brown communities in New York City alongside Asian communities. So one way that we do that is through our Gift a Meal campaign. And for anyone unfamiliar, your donation has double the impact because 100% of the funds will go to a restaurant, which is one of our merchants, again, immigrant, Asian-owned, family-owned small business in Chinatown. And we raise meals that go to a distributing partner. Sometimes that's ourselves, but sometimes it's an amazing partner like La Jornada, which is a food pantry that services Flushing. They recently also had their USDA funding cut. But we were able to partner with them to gift meals to the Bland Houses in Flushing, which is a housing complex that primarily houses Black and Brown families alongside elderly Asians. And at that moment, they had gone 6 months without working gas in the dead of winter. But through this campaign, we were able to directly support an Asian business that was suffering from financial burden due to rising xenophobia, while directly nourishing Black families in our own city. And just really going to show, like, piggybacking off Yashica, this kind of intersectional work is totally a real truth that all of us can embody as long as we're mindful of it, because we are creating a love ethic, we are nurturing a collective good, and we're working towards a future where xenophobia doesn't shut down a business and every Black person has the social, political power to survive. So again, we are all connected, never mutually exclusive. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I think often about how if we focus on how we're being disenfranchised, then we actually are always just clawing our way back up the ladder, right? But if we focus on the structure that's disenfranchising us and deconstructing and establishing that, then we can actually maybe make progress in a way that we don't have to continually climb back up. Kari, I see you unmuted.
Yes. I feel like intersectionality is the sexy word of 2020 activism, but it is so important. And I think that it is something that, especially when you're online and when you are putting your platform out for pretty much the entire world to see, you have to always think about how can we have a voice that for our community, but still be inclusive of other communities. And just like Lily and Yashica just said, it's like, these are not mutually exclusive issues. You know, the 400 years of systemic racism towards the Black community is intertwined with the 150 years of systemic racism towards Asian Americans. And so I always say it's like our struggles, while they are not the same, they're linked. And our liberation will be linked as well. So when the Black community has a win, like the Asian American community has a win, you know? And that's how it's been, like through the patterns of history. Like when like the Emancipation Proclamation came, it's like that is how the first group of Asian Americans were able to come into this country. And so it's knowing that like both of our oppression and liberation is linked. And that goes to the same for all other communities, all the other marginalized groups. So like BLM, it's not a trend. Unfortunately, a lot of people, especially during this year, have made it into a trend. But it's not. It's gonna continue, and I mean it's gonna take a long time to uproot 400 years of systemic racism and oppression. But because of that, it's knowing that like we have to keep that in the back of our minds. Like how are we being inclusive? How are we creating an impact? How are we uplifting Black voices, Black creatives in our work while still being able to do both? And that's the wonderful thing about living this time. voice, but also like uplift the voices of others. And so that is something that kind of is geared towards. And also just asking the Black community and marginalized communities, like, what do you need? Like, what, instead of kind of like figuring out what to do on ourselves, like, oh, should we create a panel, or oh, should we create like a merchandise line? It's like, no, sometimes all they need is us to stand in arms with them, is to march with them, to show support, or to support businesses and doing what we can. And so I think it's asking what they want. And then also another part is just knowing when it's okay to kind of step back to educate yourself, because I did not know anything, pretty much not anything, about like not only like Black history or Black American history, but Asian American history too. And so it's like, especially during this 2020 time, it's been a time of like reflection and education, and like reading and listening to stories of Asian American activists, of leaders in the Black community, sharing exactly what their communities have gone through. And from then it's like, how do I translate that for a digital platform and for an online audience? But yeah, intersectionality is a wonderful, wonderful buzzword, and it will continue as our communities continue to intertwine.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Kara. I love you highlighting, and this is something for anybody who's listening, and this is a good reminder for myself, right? Listen, right? Don't help somebody by telling them how you're going to help them. Help somebody by asking first and foremost, like, what do you need? And that's such a good best practice for us to do anytime that we're doing connective, intersectional work between communities. Yin, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think co-creation is a good way forward. I think when you co-create, you learn together, you learn about each other, but you also learn together. And so I've been learning a lot with Kamau, who is the director of Black Gotham Experience. And we're so happy to be working with them this Chinatown Arts Week. They're our biggest commission. So also sharing in funds is important. Like, these are real things. We talk about scarcity, sharing funds is important. And, just sharing histories, right? Like, my understanding of Chinatown versus his understanding of Chinatown. We've learned so much from him about the first Black landowners in Chinatown, the mid-1600s, and kind of even thinking about like the depths of the layers of my neighborhood, and just all the people that were in this neighborhood before us too. It just, it takes learning, and I just think having that outlet of creating together has really, maybe it's not as broad, I don't think there's like that much messaging going on. I mean, the piece we'll create, hopefully there will be some messaging outwards about that, but just even the act of doing it, I think can make some good stuff happen.
I love that. I love that. I mean, I love everything you just said. I love the last thing you said, though. Just the act of doing it can make something happen. And I think that a lot of times when we talk about online activism, people think of viral, right? People think something has to go viral, by which it means get big numbers, big analytics in order for it to be effective. What you've done a couple times during this conversation, Yin, is you've reminded me that online can also mean local, right? Especially in a time like right now. Online can mean 2 neighborhood organizations just checking in with each other. And I certainly have the faith that if it's grounded well, it'll lead to good things. But I think that often when we think about social messaging, when we think about online activism, the structure of it can get away from the roots, right? And we can just say, oh, how are we going to go viral? How is, what's, and certainly making a good hashtag is a very valuable skill in itself. But if you've got a good hashtag, but no way to follow through, right? If you're sitting in your design studio and thinking, yo, this one could get 1 million retweets, but you're not connecting to other communities, you're not in solidarity, you're not talking to folks on the ground, what's it going to come down to?
Can I add? I forgot to bring up this point. So the piece that we're creating is it'll be a video which will live online, but also throughout Chinatown Arts Week, we'll be projecting it on the streets. And so I was just thinking about the people that we can reach within our neighborhood that we wouldn't be able to reach online. So, you know, aunties walking by are gonna see this story about Domingo, and maybe their understanding will be at a different level, but there'll be a first step or a second step to understanding or starting conversations. So kind of going the opposite and taking it offline and just bringing it real neighborhood. It's more of our strategy.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, you know, things can be born online and branch out outside. We don't have to just think. We're in a digitally connected world, which means that it can connect to the streets, as it were. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. So I think, you know, I want to leave a little bit of time. We've got about 15 minutes left. I want to leave a little time at the end for crosstalk. We've got an incredible group of people gathered here. And I'd love for y'all to chat amongst yourselves a little bit. I think that'd be very interesting. We also may have some Q&A from the audience. So audience, if you're listening, please put it in Twitch. Please put it in the Facebook comments if you got particular questions. And if we have time, we're going to try to get to that. But before we get there, sort of, you know, a little more rapid fire. You know, we started by talking about some highlights, right? Some big wins, some takeaway points. Not to close on a down note, but the reality, right, is that things don't always go as planned or as hoped. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing, right? That can actually be very valuable because our goal is not to just feel good nonstop, right? Our goal is to learn to be effective, to be impactful. So, you know, sort of rapid fire, if we could go around, share something that you see as a common and avoidable mistake that orgs or campaigns often make in online activism, you know, like a little best practices. What's the easiest thing to avoid that can save a lot of pain for folks? Yashica, I see you going in.
This is something we can definitely talk a little bit about because, you know, as an ad agency adjusting to the so-called new normal, this is something we constantly have to think about. And, you know, one of the things that we constantly talk among ourselves and try to follow is that it's okay to make mistakes because we are going to make mistakes. Like you exactly said, the goal is to not just feel good about ourselves, to not just keep patting ourselves at the on our backs, but is to really deliver some kind of actionable change. And just in the context of what we're trying to do with connecting brands with grassroots level organizers and entrepreneurs and entertainers even, one of the things that we've learned is that just because we have these amazing stories to tell, that's just because we have this narrative or that we are trying to bring this actionable change does not mean everybody will be ready to listen to us, in particular brands, because when we go to these brands, they're just beginning to get on board with Black Lives Matter. They're just beginning to say, okay, we'll put our money where our mouth is. So how do we create this space for Asian American activism within these brand spaces? And the answer to that we've discovered is to educate, advocate, and organize. We have to constantly keep the pressure on. We have to constantly be involved in the roles of telling them what's going on within the communities, in the roles of connecting people like the wonderful people we have on a panel, connecting each of you all to the brands. And then they can probably see very actively that your role in the community is to not just create a brand presence, but also be more deeply involved. And that's not going to happen overnight. This is something that it is a continuous work. It is something that we have to keep at. And that's just so far our biggest takeaway in this, you know, in our foray in advocacy.
Yeah, so don't give up, right? Basically is what you're saying. Like just because
Absolutely.
yeah, that's
It's never going to be
always important.
easy. It can be said for everything, but in the times that we live in, it's not going to be easy. What we're starting is it's a germ of an idea, and how do we make it bigger? That's important.
Love it. I love it. Anyone else? Yeah, Lily.
I think something that we really learned is always broadening our scope. So we have a tendency to be really hyper specific with our content. We work with our niche very, very well, but sometimes our resources can be more relevant to ABCs than immigrants because they're coming from an entirely different set of experiences when we discuss these issues with them, including the merchants that we have onboarded, and we always need to keep that in mind. And we're always trying to find examples to find common ground between shared histories, historical events that would be directly relevant to them that we can reference. And we've made a mistake before where we've been too broad in our references, and we realize we need to provide a lot more context than we're giving, because there's always going to be that disconnect. And we need to be more mindful about that in order for intersectionality to be impactful. So for our merchants, a lot like our parents, they've been so focused on making a living and surviving. And we need to remember and recall that kind of patience when they don't understand social justice issues right away in America, and always broaden our scope. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Don't self-limit. Expand the width and the vision, but know that in so doing, you're going to have to do some additional steps of translation again.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, that's awesome. Yin, Kari, whoever would like to see you leaning in. Yeah.
Go ahead, Kari.
Okay, I just have two quick things. The first thing is that we've noticed, especially when it comes towards like racism, is that a lot of people, like there's a lot of like disunity within the Asian American community, like ourselves. It's like we'll have people in the Korean community saying, "Why would I speak up against the China virus?" Or that's like against that. I'm not even Chinese, as if the people who are causing those attacks would even know the difference. But it's just the fact that it's like, no, it's like we are Asian American. Like this is a term that we brought to ourselves and that we called ourselves to unite. And so this includes like Malaysians, this includes Southeast Asians, and it's having that in mind, especially when you are talking about like anti-Asian American. It's like a lot of times people think of it, and a lot of times organizations are thinking about like Eastern Asian, because these are the people that are organizing and stuff. And so it's also important to have diversity within your own organization itself, and having different voices represented and reflected, I think is really important. And the second thing is that we tried to take on too much in the beginning, and without even knowing that like there are other organizations, because we were pretty new, we were just this year, there are other organizations that have been doing this work for decades, and what they don't have is the means to translate that to the younger generation. And so for us, we can't do it all, but we can kind of like pinpoint and highlight different organizations who are doing different works in activism. And so I think that's important, like one to amplify other people's voices. And it's best to amplify other organizations, especially if they have like all the resources. I know that like Act to Change is an amazing organization that has like 40 pages they've written on how to combat like anti-bullying. And so I think that it's important to being able to like highlight and being able to give other organizations like the spotlight, because they have the best resources to help people with those specific issues.
Great, awesome, thanks, Kari. Yeah, those are both great points and important. Yin,
yeah,
what's your thoughts on this?
Totally second what Kari just said. I mean, especially people coming into this work. I know a lot of people were woken up, during this time of crisis, both the pandemic and BLM, and were activated. But they might not have been in this space before. And they really want to jump in and help. And that is amazing. But there's a lot of listening that needs to happen for most effective work. Just because you don't know you haven't heard about it, it's not in your network, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. In fact, probably means it exists, it's you're not on the right network, right? And a lot of that's, and not to be the, it's not on social media, right? It's not online. If you're talking about neighborhood work, this is work that doesn't, show up this way and is not easily accessed if you're not plugged into the neighborhood in that way or the community in that way. And so if you're coming, using awesome tools of social media, but you're not really coming from that space, you're not really coming from that community, and with all the greatest intentions, I would just say there's a lot of listening to be on, and very careful choices of how you want to represent your work of how it's coming, because it can be divisive to groups that have been there longer and have been, in their way doing the work, and that's not as visible. Yeah, and I think amplifying, finding them, doing that work and amplifying them in, sharing all that great intention and energy is a great thing.
I love that. Yeah, can we banish the notion of selling ourselves by saying, no one's ever done this work, finally someone's addressing it? Anytime we say that, we're just contributing to erasure, right? And I'm very tired, even in the media, arts, entertainment space, so tired of people saying, hey, no one's making noise for Asians, so support my music video. Hey, no one's doing this, so support my Kickstarter. I'm gonna make a short film. Let's do it as, if we're gonna talk about ourselves, let's talk about it as, we've been erased for too long, we've been silenced for too long. I'm part of a heritage, I'm part of a lineage, I'm part of a community. And I love what you're saying about it's going on. We need to listen and learn. If we're charging in with all this energy, let's redirect that into listening to the community and learning from the community and investing in the community, rather than saying, hey, y'all, here's my new storefront, come to the pop-up.
Can I add one more thing? Sorry. I love talking to you, Jason, because it always makes me think of more things. But also there's different type of feedback you get online, right? You get the likes, or even fundraising, right? You get, donations. And so it's a different type of feedback. So you may be getting positive feedback in your network, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's connecting, or it can be. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying they're not the same ways of looking at, feedback.
Yeah, that's a great point. And learning to listen well, right? Sometimes we don't even know the metrics, we don't even know the analytics of what response looks like, because as as I think we've talked about on this call, the systems are in place to reinforce the outcomes that have already happened, right? And so if we're happy with what we already seeing happen, what we see already happening, then sure, the conventional metrics work. But maybe the post, maybe the tweet that gets the most retweets isn't necessarily the one that actually helps the community. Maybe that's the one that helps Twitter drive engagement to its algorithm, right? Maybe the Facebook post that gets the longest, angriest comment thread has the most engagement, but is not the one that's actually going to drive Chinatown seniors or, Hmong, marginalized, at-risk folks at risk of being evicted, not going to give them housing. So we need to come up with our own metrics rather than just relying on corporate metrics. I think that's a great point, which I take from you. I don't know. I don't know if that's what you were saying, but
you make it sound better, Jason. I hear you're a wordsmith or something.
Yeah. All right, we got a minute or two left. Lily, I see you've been unmuted and raring to go. Let's just wrap it up a little bit. Lily, why don't you say some stuff? And then I do want us to all get our social media out there. This is an ongoing conversation. If anyone's tuning in and you want to talk more, Lily, why don't you say what it seems like is on your heart, and then let's go around, share our Instagram handles, share the best ways to contact us.
All right. Thank you so much, Jason, for this moment. I think Yin gave us a perfect opportunity. I wanted to speak to this when we're talking about partnerships, but Think Chinatown has actually been one of our fiscal sponsors for some of our gift a meal campaigns, because our organization is not considered a nonprofit because we directly provide relief to for-profit businesses, these immigrant businesses, and that is not traditionally considered a nonprofit, though we know our hearts are in the right place. And because of Think Chinatown, we've been able to have this kind of fiscal sponsorship relationship with people who want to give us donations. So shout out to that. Thank you so much for building that network that we are definitely finding nourishment from.
Yeah, I love it. And that's, like you said, starting off, Ian, I've only been in a room with, a couple of y'all, but I feel like what I am really encouraged by is that online activism does not mean shallow activism. It doesn't mean performative activism. It doesn't mean the impact is limited to online only. And I love that already there's a web and a network between all of us. And I know it's going to continue expanding. We do have a couple more minutes, actually. We got a little time bonus, little video game extension. So if anyone else, Yashica, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with that, especially, going back to what you said earlier. We live online now. Our lives are so intertwined. And of course, a lot of our work as a marketing agency is both online and offline. So I just want to take this time to address that. If you are a creator who's Asian American, if you're an entertainer, if you feel free to collaborate with us. Reach out to us at Admir Asia on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We are extremely active on all those platforms, and we are looking for people. We want to listen. We want to create those connections. That's what our skill set is. We want to collaborate. So, reach out to us, go check out what we're doing, and help us spread the word out there. That's what we're here to do. So call us. We are here to listen.
Awesome. I love it. Y'all heard it. Y'all tuning in. If you got something to give, if y'all got something to offer, if y'all got something you need, this is what they're here for at Admirasia, everywhere, apparently. And please hit them. Kari.
All right. So yes, first and foremost, we are here to just uplift not only Asian American creatives, but all creatives in general who want to continue and push forward the work of anti-racism. And so we have our event that I'm going to plug in one more time on October 17th. It'll be online on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. And it's Raise a Million. So it's on our Facebook, an event page at Hate is a Virus with an underscore. And then on Instagram, we are also Hate is a Virus with an underscore. And yeah, so follow us, DM us. Also, if there are any artists or people who have stories and to share, we're here to listen. And if there are any organizations that might even need help reaching the younger generation who have been doing the work and who continue to do the work, we would love to partner with you. Yeah, and so we're excited. October 15th is the big day, so please join us.
Awesome. So yeah, so everybody, that is at Hate is a Virus underscore Twitter, Facebook, and October 15th. October 15th, right? No?
Wait, sorry. October 17th.
No.
October
Yes.
17th. October 17th.
It didn't sound
Yeah.
yeah.
I know. And I was like, I said it and I was like, I don't think that's right. October 17th.
Raise a Million Volume 2.
Follow us on social media so you'll continue to get updates so you don't miss the date. Like I just did.
Yes. Awesome. Yin, how about
Yeah,
let them know.
we got so much going on. Chinatown Arts Week, October 16th to 25th. You're in New York, come to the neighborhood, join us. We're having safely, art in a safe way. You can see things asynchronistically, projections through windows, Chinese fan dance, sword dance, Qigong. Qigong is actually online, so everyone else can go to the Qigong class. It's so Jason, I'll see you there. We have Tai Chi classes in the park. So, all the things that is considered arts in Chinatown are going to be there, but also some really great commissions that I've told you guys about. And also, I always forget to sell ourselves, but Think Chinatown's also Rochelle Kwan, our storytelling team lead, is putting out some amazing storytelling projects with great commissions from API artists. So all of that's online right now, thinkchinatown.org. Hope to see you guys
Awesome.
there.
Thinkchinatown.org and Instagram.com/thinkchinatown. Lily, why don't you let people know how they can find and get in touch with y'all?
Yes, so our main platform is Instagram. That's kind of where we were born. Our handle is @SendChinatownLove. And we don't have any big events coming up, but every week we launch a new merchant that we onboard. And we spend the whole week dedicated to that story and fundraising for that merchant and their needs. And my family restaurant is actually going to be onboarded hopefully soon. So heads up, please follow @SendChinatownLove on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. It's just @ChinatownLove. And hopefully you see my family story on there one day too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lily. Everybody, please follow @SendChinatownLove. We love going to Chinatown. Right now, we can't all make it out in person, but this is a way of going, supporting the community that's fed us so much. So that is about our time. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you to all these incredible panelists, to the teams and the staff. I know that none of this is an individual effort. There's a lot of people that go into doing all the incredible work we just heard about. So thank you to all of them. Thank you again to Asian CineVision and the Asian American International Film Festival, the 43rd edition of that. Shout outs to Asia Society, our community partner for this series. My name is Jason Chu @JasonChuMusic. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to share space with y'all, and I look forward to the next time that we get to do that together. So if we can wave to the internet, shout outs to the internet. Thank you y'all so much for tuning in and being a part of this.